13 years ago, I was performing a free spinal screening at the YMCA here in Westboro. And a gentleman came up to talk to me, wanted to know what I was doing. So I explained, we're checking postures and looking at your balance, and because if those are off, that's an indication your spine's misaligned. And I explained that to him, and so we went through the screening, and then afterwards he wanted to schedule an appointment in the office. So I scheduled him, but I not only scheduled him, I scheduled his wife and his 4 boys, right? So there's 6 of them that were coming in. And I remember when they came in, because I was going through the history, and I got all the way through all their histories, and then finally the last history was their youngest boy, Danny. And when Danny came in to see me, Danny was 7 years old, and he was really sick. And when I say he was really sick, at 7 years old, he had already had over 200 emergency room visits.
Wow.
Now, if you have kids, you will do anything to help your child. And all you want him to do is be healthy, right? And he had already been at the emergency room over 200 times. And of those 200 plus emergency room visits, he had been admitted over 50 times. Those admissions might last anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks. But when you totaled it up, he had spent over 400 days in the hospital in the first 7 years of life. He spent over a year in the hospital, right, at different intervals. And so I went through the exam and I took the x-ray, and this is Danny's x-ray, the side view of his neck. And so I know everybody in here knows from the front your spine should be straight, from the side it should have curves, right? So Danny's neck has a curve. The problem is that it's curved too much. Most people have a loss of curve. Not Danny, he had too much curve. And C1, the top bone, that bone should be between 30 and 40 degrees. It's almost 60 degrees. So I explained to the parents, the brain sitting right up here is trying to send information down the spinal cord, out the nerves to tell everything how to work. And Danny's so misaligned, he's going to put pressure in the spinal cord and the brainstem right up at the top. And then I said to them, but here's the thing. I don't know if it's the reason for him getting sick all the time. But what I do know is that if we get it in better alignment, we get the pressure off the nervous system, it's going to allow his body to function and heal at a higher potential. And so he started getting adjusted. After his first adjustment in 2009, the very next day, he went with his family and they hiked Mount Wachusett. He had never gone for a 10-minute walk before that.
Wow.
Because he was sick all the time, but he also was diagnosed with low muscle tone, failure to thrive, and learning disabilities. So I started adjusting him, and as the weeks go by and the months go by, he's getting better and better, and because he's getting better, they're taking him off all of his medication. I didn't tell the parents to take him off the medication. The parents worked with the doctors at Children's that he was seeing, and he started coming off all of his medications. Because he's feeling better, he's coming off all of his medications, he's more active, his low muscle tone goes away. He's feeling better, he's more active, his low muscle tone goes away, he's able to focus in school now. So in 2010, he gets the Most Improved Student Award.
Wow.
And I keep adjusting him, and I'm adjusting him, and we're getting his spine in better alignment. Eventually we take a follow-up x-ray. This is his follow-up x-ray. C1 is at a normal angle, and that's a healthy curve now. So we corrected the subluxations, we got the pressure off the nervous system, and by doing that, not only did he excel in middle school and in high school, he ended up getting his Eagle Scout. And in 2020, he got his first acceptance letter of multiple acceptance letters. And today he's a junior in college. And when I tell his story, I think about that a lot. And I think about, and we say this at every workshop, when you have your health, you have a million dreams. But when you lose your health, you have one, right? It's to get your health back. And not just for Danny, but for his entire family. It affected everybody, and everything they did. They couldn't even go on vacations because Danny was always sick, right? And so I want to welcome you to tonight's workshop on Bulletproof Your Immune System. And I want you to recognize that your immune system is one of your many superpowers, right? So just like Superman has superpowers, right? So what are Superman's superpowers? He can fly, and he's bulletproof, right? Mm-hmm. You have superpowers, and one of your superpowers is your immune system. But most people really don't understand the immune system because it's so complex. It's all these organs and tissues and cells all working together to try and protect you against foreign invaders, right? That's what the immune system does. But the immune system is also designed to help you fight cancer. So what most people don't know is that every person, everybody, smallest baby, oldest adult, we all have pre-cancer and cancer cells in our body. But they don't become full-blown cancer because it's the job of the immune system to recognize those cells as malfunctioning and destroy them before they destroy you. That's your immune system at work. And so this immune system starts out with physical barriers. And so I want you to think of the physical barriers like your missile defense system, right? We have all these germs in the air, and on the surfaces, and they're everywhere, and they're all trying to get on the inside. And they're only trying to get on the inside because they're trying to survive, right? So they're trying to survive, but their survival can come at your expense. So we have all these germs floating around and trying to get on the inside, but we have this barrier around us that's called your skin and your mucous membranes. Mm-hmm. And most of them can't penetrate the skin, so they can't get on the inside. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Then you have the T cells and the B cells. So if these germs do get on the inside, now we need boots on the ground, right? Or in the water. That's your T cells and B cells. That's the armed services, right? So they're going to be looking around for these foreign invaders. Come on in. They're going to be looking around for these foreign invaders. And so if you have a germ that gets in the bloodstream, the T cells and the B cells recognize that as not yourself. And it says, that's a foreign invader. We need to get rid of that before it becomes harmful to us. And so the job of the B cells and the T cells is to engulf it, to swallow it, to puncture it, to basically destroy it so that you're healthy. And then you have antibodies. Antibodies are produced after exposure, right? So for example, if I come in contact with chickenpox gets on the inside, the B cells and the T cells, they surround it and get rid of it, right? But then my body says, hey, I'm going to protect myself against future chickenpox virus. So it produces these antibodies, and the antibodies stay in your body for years and sometimes decades, like for example, the chickenpox, right? Stays in your body for decades. So if you have future exposure, the moment the chickenpox virus goes in the inside, the antibody attaches to it, and it's a prisoner of war. Right? That's your UN peacekeepers. And how many of you have heard of chickenpox parties? I know there's enough people in here that are old enough to know about chickenpox parties, right? I wasn't pointing anybody out. But I want you to think about this for a second. Back in the day, if you had a friend or a neighbor whose children got chickenpox and your kids hadn't had chickenpox yet, you used to go over to their house to expose them to the chickenpox, right? Then they would get the chickenpox and they'd have immunity for life. We did this with our boys. Our boys are 19 and 21, but when they were 3 and 5 years old, we had friends in New Hampshire that called up and said, hey, our kids have chickenpox. We were like, great, can we come over? I mean, nobody today would think that, right? We're like, great, can we come over? So we go over to their house, and our kids are playing with their kids. We're there for probably 4 or 5 hours. We're literally having them share sippy cups and suckers.
Oh my goodness.
We get home, 3, 4, 5 days later, they both break out.
Yeah.
Their B cells and their T cells fight it, and then their body produces antibodies for future exposure. Superpowers of the human body. But just like Superman, who has superpowers, Superman had one substance that could take him out. What was it? Kryptonite. Everybody knows Superman was just weakened by kryptonite, right? Well, there's also kryptonite for the human body. So let's start out with poor diet. Processed foods, wheat and gluten, sugar. Processed foods, foods that are in boxes and cans. Foods that have additives and preservatives. Again, used for cellular repair and energy, or it's toxic and your body has to figure out how to get rid of it. So the more processed food you eat, the worse your immune system can be, because you're literally not building healthy cells, you're building sick cells. And sick cells can't fight infections very well. Wheat and gluten, absolutely inflammatory. And I can't even tell you how many people, somebody said, hey, I would really love to be at the workshop tonight, but I'm having pasta. Like, you should be at the workshop tonight. Right? Because wheat and gluten is inflammatory, and it literally causes an inflammation in your GI system, which is where a ton of the immune system lies and responds to stuff, right? And then sugar. Sugar, I believe, is the worst food you can have, period. But it's the number one thing that'll crush your immune system. So I'm going to share a bit of research with you. And I'm not going to read this, I'm just going to explain it. Role of sugar in human neutrophilic phagocytosis. Everybody knows what that means, right?
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
right.
good. So, sugars in the human body affect the white blood cells and their ability to kill germs. Everybody understand it now?
Yep.
So that's what this is about. And by the way, American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, 1973. Wow. Almost 50 years ago, this study came out, and it wasn't the first of its kind. So what they did was they took a group of people and then they had them fast, AKA you sleep overnight, you don't eat anything when you get up in the morning. Okay, so let's say it's this group of people right here. Everybody, you slept last night, it's now first thing in the morning, now you're going to go into the lab, right? We're going to take some of you, we're not going to do anything with you, we're not going to give you any sugars, but the rest of you, we're going to give you 100 grams of sugar. That's a fairly high amount of sugar. And what we're going to do is we're going to then draw your blood at a half hour, 1, 2, 3, and 5 hours after you've had the sugar. And we're going to compare it to those that didn't have the sugar. We're going to draw that blood, we're going to put it on a slide, and on that slide we're going to have bacterial cells. And then we're going to see how many of the white blood cells, how many of the bacterial cells can a white blood cell consume. That's how they did this, right? So they draw the blood at the half hour, they put it on the thing, and then they see how many white blood cells, how many bacterial cells that white blood cell can gobble up. Then they do it at 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and 5 hours, and then they compare it to the control group. Right? And what they discovered is that already at a half an hour in, the white blood cells are becoming less effective in eating up less bacterial cells. The biggest difference was between 1 and 2 hours in, but even at 5 hours later, the white blood cells were less effective at destroying and gobbling up those bacterial cells. Now, since then, they've repeated this study dozens of times in dozens of different ways. And so now we actually can tell you how bad it is. So this graph right here, is right there in your form, right? So now if you look at that, you're going to see the amount of sugar consumed, no sugar, 6, 12, 18, and 24 teaspoons, the number of bacteria a white blood cell can destroy in a half an hour, and then the percent decrease in the immune response. So if you have no sugar, one white blood cell in your body can consume 14 bacterial cells. But the more sugar you have, the less it can consume until you get down to a banana split. And a banana split is so much sugar, 24 teaspoons, that now that one white blood cell can only destroy or gobble up one bacterial cell. It's a 92% decrease in your immune system.
So you can only have a banana split when you're healthy, not when you're sick.
One banana split a year. Ice cream in between. Banana split a year. But if you think about it, that's literally, they say that's the same exact thing as uncontrolled diabetes. Not just diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes. That's the equivalent, right? That's how dampened the immune response is when you consume sugar. And so here's what I think about. We just came through candy season. We're headed into pie season, and we're going to finish with party season. And we can't figure out why we have cold and flu season. And that's not the only reason. I understand that, but that is a major reason why our immune system is shot by the time we get to the new year, right? And this year it's even worse. Have you been watching the news? Have you seen this? They're calling it the Triple Demek, right? The Triple Demek, COVID, we've been dealing with that for 2.5, almost 3 years now, right? But now flu and RSV. Flu is going to affect the middle-aged and elderly more. RSV is actually affecting the younger kids more, right? And it is running rampant in the United States right now, and they're concerned that it's going to overwhelm the hospitals, specifically the pediatric units, because we have so many cases occurring right now. But you know why we have so many cases occurring right now? Because of what we did over the last 2.5 years. See, what happens is that when you isolate, when you do these things, you're actually more susceptible because you're not exposed. And now all these kids that weren't around their friends for the last 2.5 years are back in school full force. And now they're spreading those germs, and their immune system is not strong enough, and so now they're in trouble, right? So what do you need to do? First and foremost, you need to eat well, right? And this is a no-brainer. Everybody knows this. You should eat dark green leafy vegetables, fruit, beans, nuts, seeds, and clean meats, right? Those are the things that we should do every day. And yes, it's okay to have a little bit of fruit snacks, right? Different things like that. But this should be the staples in our diet. Yes.
How do you define clean meats?
Yeah, thank you.
Clean meats, antibiotic and growth hormone free.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Yes. And as a matter of fact, let's even go back to dark green leafy vegetables, fruits, beans, nuts, and seeds. Pesticide free if you can, right? In other words, organic. Because everything you put in your body is used for what? Energy and cellular repair, or toxic, right? So reduce the toxins by eating clean, right? But that's on a daily basis you want to do that. What do you do once you catch a cold or you have the flu? Well, there's a bunch of things you can do. Number one for me is vitamin C. Vitamin C is antimicrobial, antibacterial, antiviral. Vitamin C RDA is 80 milligrams a day. I do not supplement vitamin C on a regular basis, but when I get a cold, it's 3,000 milligrams a day. 1,000 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm gonna hammer that vitamin C for the next 2, 3, 4 days, and then I'll be through it, right? The next one is vitamin D. Again, RDA is 600 international units a day. I actually do supplement vitamin D. How many of you know what your vitamin D levels are? And you mind sharing?
I had blood work. And
Okay.
did it.
So does anybody know what a good level of vitamin D is in the blood? Nobody knows this. It's one of the most
No,
important things that
I
you
know.
should have. We should be at 50. And if we're below 50, we should supplement. And the reason we should supplement is because you get vitamin D from 2 sources. Number 1 is sunlight. Hits the skin, you produce vitamin D. Number 2 is the food you eat. That's the only way you can get vitamin D. We live above the 35th parallel. Above the 35th parallel, even if we're out there without a shirt on, we can't produce enough vitamin D. And nobody's going to be out there today with their shirt on, right? So, you first and foremost, have your vitamin D levels tested. So when you go for an annual physical, and they're going to do the blood work anyhow, say, hey, are you checking my vitamin D levels? And when they say no, the reason for that, by the way, is because the insurance companies don't like to pay for it, so it's not on a regular panel. Say, can you get them checked this year? And when they come back, if they're below 50, supplement. And when you supplement, you're going to supplement 5,000 international units a day. And the reason for that is because this won't even move the needle at all, right? So if you're already low, if let's say that you're at 20 or 25, there is no way you're going to get to 30 by taking the RDAs. You have to take 5,000, you have to basically dose it up to get up there, and then 6 months later, get it checked. And then a year later, get it checked again. Because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, you can get too much, okay?
You can or cannot?
You can.
No,
So it's
yeah.
because it's fat soluble.
Right.
Water soluble vitamins, you'll just basically have expensive urine, as they say,
Exactly.
right? That's vitamin
Yeah.
C. Vitamin C is water soluble. If you take too much, you pee it out, you're fine.
Right.
Vitamin D, fat soluble, you take too much, it's stored, right? And so now you can become toxic. And you'd have to take, your vitamin D levels would have to be over 125 to be toxic, by the way. So in other words, you'd have to take mega doses, 50,000 international units a day, for probably a couple of months before you be at those levels. All right, omega-3s, salmon, avocados, fish, nuts, right, seeds. That's where you're going to get your omega-3s. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory, so they help you fight those infections as well. And then the ones that I always love are the ginger, garlic, zinc, elderberry, and apple cider vinegar. And then you also have this one in your folder as well. This is our Nature's Flu Shot, right? And it has some of those ingredients in it. So that's what I do when I'm feeling under the weather, all right, from a food perspective. Kryptonite number 2 is stress. Stress is a killer. We've all heard that before, right? Stress is a killer. Well, that's only partially true because there's acute stressors and there's chronic stressors. And one of them is designed to save your life and one of them will shorten your life. And so let me just give you a couple of examples. You get a bunch of friends together and you decide you're going to go on safari. So you're walking and all of a sudden you hear a little rustling in the weeds and you look around and there's a lion attacking. That's an acute stressor. Man, that thing comes on right like that, right? So when you're under acute stress, there's certain things that happen, but the same things happen when you're under chronic stress. Chronic stress are the things that we do every single day that just overwhelm us. That can be in regards to jobs and finances, relationships and health issues and you name it, right? All these things are piling on top and creating stress in our lives. But what happens, whether it's an acute stressor or a chronic stressor, it puts you into a state of fight or flight. It's the sympathetic nervous system that goes into overdrive, and now you're on edge, right? So what happens? Increased muscle tone. During an acute stressor, that's designed to save your life. You have to decide, are you going to fight or are you going to run? Now, I'm your chiropractor, I'm going to recommend that you run. And if you're not faster than the slowest person, trip somebody. Because you got to get out of there, okay? That's going to save your life. Chronic stress, though, increased muscle tone, neck pain, headaches, tension across the shoulders, right? Literally creating subluxation is one of the most misunderstood causes of misalignments, is chronic stress, right? Blood pressure goes up. We need to divert the blood from the internal organs to the muscles so that it can have the oxygen it needs to produce the energy so that you can fight or flight. But chronic stress, now all of a sudden we increase our risk of heart attack and stroke, right? But don't worry, there's a medication for that. Digestion slows. Why would digestion slow? Well, an acute stressor, you're being attacked by a lion. You do not care if you digest lunch. Your goal is not to be lunch. Right? Chronic stress over time, indigestion, reflux, ulcers. How many people have heard, oh, he developed an ulcer because he had so much stress? Right? Even lower GI issues can happen when we're under chronic stress. Decreased serotonin levels. Serotonin is the happy hormone. Ever seen anybody happy getting attacked by a lion? Not me. So that's not going to happen there, but it is going to happen here, and that's called depression. But again, don't worry. We have a medication for that. Increased anxiety. No shit. Being attacked by a lion. SSRIs.
Yeah.
Blood sugar elevated. Again, why would the blood sugar elevate? Because you need to have that energy, the sugar ready for energy production in the muscles. And it needs to be readily available, and sugar is it, right? So we dump a lot of sugar into the bloodstream, we get it in the muscles, we produce energy for fight or flight. Diabetes. Increased LDL. LDL is a cholesterol. Is LDL the good cholesterol or the bad cholesterol?
Bad cholesterol.
It's bad cholesterol, right? Fooled you. There's no such thing as bad cholesterol. It's all good. There's bad levels. LDL, if I took it out of your body, if I completely robbed you of LDL, you wouldn't last 2 days. Because it has some incredibly important functions in your body. One of the functions is that LDL is the precursor to all the stress hormones. So when you're under stress, you're releasing adrenaline and cortisol, epinephrine and norepinephrine. LDL is required for the production of those. So you're under stress, the liver ramps up the production of LDL, releases it, and now you can produce more stress hormones that you've been dumping into the system. But one of its most important functions is it's the patch for the damage that we're doing to the blood vessel walls. So if we have an inflammatory lifestyle, if we eat a bunch of food that's damaging to our body, we have inflammation in our body. And that inflammation is causing little microscopic holes in our blood vessels. If we didn't have LDL, we wouldn't be able to patch that hole, and if we couldn't patch that hole, we would bleed to death. Is LDL bad or good? It's good cholesterol in the right amount, right? It's bad when it's jacked way up. That's what happens with chronic stress. So we just keep dumping it and dumping it and dumping it. Now we have too much, now we have plaquing, and again, we increase our risk of heart attack and stroke. Make sense? And then finally we have suppression of the immune system. Again, during a lion attack, you don't care to heal wounds and fight colds and flus. Again, after the lion attack, you're probably going to need a little extra immune system boost, but not during it, right? So that's why it depresses your immune system, because it needs to divert the energy to everything else that you have to do for survival, right? So what do we need to do? Reduce your stress by thinking well. My go-to is prayer and meditation. Like when I'm under stress, I just got to say, man, give it to God and just let it go, and help me work through this, because I have no idea sometimes how to handle some of these things. But I know that if I spend some time in prayer and meditation, we can work through that. Gratitude journal. I can tell you that that's one of the best things you can do, because if you have an attitude of gratitude, it's pretty tough to have anxiety at that time, right? Much, much tougher. Get out in nature, man, just see the glory that's all around us, all the beauty and stuff like that. Take a walk, go for a bike ride, whatever you need to do. Hang out with happy people, get rid of those stinky thinkers, right? Kind of hard to do, but sometimes you need to. And then stop watching the news. We are consumed with the news. And I have to tell you that there are times where I can get sucked in for a little bit, but I probably watch 15 minutes of the news a week. And it's because I don't want to stick my head in the sand. Right? I don't want to be completely ignorant to what's going on in the world. But I also know that if I keep letting all those things go into my body and into my brain, and I have no control over whether or not somebody throws a missile into Poland, right? I can't control that. So I can't let it affect me every single day, every single night, especially before I go to bed. So if you just shut off the TV and stop watching the news, just catch a little bit here and there if you want to stay informed, you're going to be much better off, right? Kryptonite number 3, sedentary lifestyle, right? If we are sedentary, all kinds of things start going downhill, right? So we know that if we're not active, our blood pressure goes up, our respiration goes up, our LDLs go up, all these things go up. In other words, all the things that stress can do, right? So we need to look at that. And so this comes right out of Center for Disease Control and Prevention. This is specifically looking at physical activity and COVID. People who do little or no physical activity are more likely to get very sick from COVID than those who are physically active. Specific findings from a CDC systemic review. So what they did was they looked at tons of articles and research. Systemic review. They looked at a bunch of it and they put it all together, and they found that physical activity is associated with a decrease in COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths, while inactivity increases the risk. Did I say that correctly? I feel like I jumbled that up a little bit.
Decrease.
That's why I thought I might have jumbled it up.
Decreased activity.
Activity decreases your risk, inactivity increases your risk. That's the way I should have said it. We'll get that.
Totally welcome.
I don't think we can edit that out though. Additional benefits, mental health and cognitive function. Excuse me. Reducing risk of chronic conditions, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Better sleep. You exercise during the day, you sleep better at night. And then the last one, immune functions, right? It improves your immune system. So we need to get out there. So of course the way to Bulletproof, exercise, core exercises, that's gonna not only help you hold your adjustments longer, it's gonna help your immune system. Aerobic exercises, that's the number one thing, by the way, when they looked at those that went into the hospital, the number one thing that kept people out of hospitals was running, believe it or not. Which is why I run with Jeff, so that we can stay out of the hospitals. And then strength training, and here's the good news. We have a workshop on stretching and exercising. Some of you have been to it, I'm sure. But we're reshooting some videos right now. The videos, we're hoping to have the videos out by the 1st of the year. So we have to shoot the videos, then we have to edit, well, I say we, Bree, thank you. We have to shoot the videos. Bree has to then edit the videos and package them and put them. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do an easy, a moderate, and a more intense. And it's not gonna be intense up here, right? Like, it's not, I'm not gonna, I lift things up and put things down. Don't worry about that. It's not going to be that intense. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to shoot these videos. If you already do exercises, you could probably jump right into what I call intense. It's not, right? But if you don't, you can start out at that beginner or intermediate stage and then work your way up. Right? And it just gets you stronger and healthier, and it will help bulletproof your immune system. Kryptonite number 4 is subluxation, right? Misalignments of the spine. So again, straight from the front, curves to the side. Misaligns, we call it a subluxation. Subluxations interfere with the nervous system. The nervous system controls and coordinates all the other systems. So again, the brain tells the muscles when to move, right? The brain directs the digestive system. The brain directs the cardiovascular system. The brain directs the immune system. And so this comes right out of the National Institute of Health. There's a clear link between the brain and body that shows a chemical signal which normally allows nerve cells to communicate with each other, can also redirect actions of the immune system. So here's what they found out just in the last few years. You have nerve endings that go right into the blood vessel wall. They communicate with the white blood cells as they're flowing through it. So check this out, the white blood cells, they find some bacteria. Their job is to kill the bacteria. They also release a chemical. And when they release that chemical, that's the chemical that's picked up by these nerve endings. Then now nerve endings send that message to the brain that says, we have foreign invaders. Now, if it's not a big deal, in other words, there's not a lot of chemicals being released, so there's not a lot of data going to the brain's going to just say, you guys got this. No big deal. But if it becomes a big deal, if a lot of chemicals are getting picked up, now the brain's going to say, what do I need to do to coordinate a full-blown immune response? So now it tells the thymus gland to release T cells, and it tells the bone marrow to release the B cells, and it tells every job in your body, right? And so now all of a sudden you're releasing these chemicals that are increasing your body temperature. What do we call it when you have a high body temperature?
Fever.
We have a fever, right? Is a fever good or bad?
Good.
We had this conversation.
It's good.
It's good.
It's good. What's the purpose of a fever?
Fighting. Your
What?
body fighting.
To kill the germ, right? Exactly right. It speeds up the chemical process and helps you kill the germ. But in our society, we're taught if you have a fever, you should do what?
Take that.
Take meds.
Take something to lower the fever. When you do that, you literally strip your body of one of its natural bulletproof immune system responses. That's what you're doing. Now there is a dangerous fever. Does anybody know what a dangerous fever is?
Over
104.
104.
I heard 104. Did I hear 105? 105. Oh, go on.
106.
106. So it's funny because our kids have a fever of 101, 102. We give them something, right? 103 and 104 is still not even dangerous. 106 starts to get there, 107 is febrile seizures, and 108 is brain damage. That's the level of danger. Now, I am not comfortable getting that high, and I would never let my kids get that high, right? So in other words, if my kids did break 105 or get to 105, I would be doing something, right? There's no question in my mind. I would not let it get there, because then it's only 1 degree away from febrile seizures and 2 degrees away from brain damage, right? So I'm going to be conservative on that. But at 104, I let it burn. And so I'm going to tell you right now, I have 2 boys. Most of you know this. 2 boys. They're 19 and 22. And when they were young, and when they had their first fevers, Mom and I were a little nervous, right? If your first child has a fever, whoo, man, that's a little scary. Okay, but after a little while, we realized they responded really differently. It was weird, because Justin, my older son, I would call him the Fast and the Furious, because he would catch something, and he would be at 101, 102, 103, 104, maybe even 104 and a half. And he would stay there for 6 or 8 hours. And all of a sudden it'd be 103, 102, 101, back down to normal. And in 24 hours, he'd just blow through almost everything that he came in contact with. Nathan was a little bit slower, not mentally. Nathan, if you see this, I apologize. Nathan's was a little bit slower. He would break 100, 100 and a half, 101, maybe 101 and a half or 102, but he never really broke that temperature right there. But it'd take him 2 or 3 days to burn through it. Right? But what I realized is that both of them were great responses for each of those kids, because both of them came through it without any issues. And we never gave them anything. We put them in the tub. We put the compresses on to keep them cool and comfortable. Put that fan on high when they're shivering, and get them under the covers when when they're hot, and put them under the covers when they're cold. Right? That's what we did, and they were just fine, and they never had a problem at 104. Right? So fevers are not bad. And there's a clear link between the nervous system and the ability to fight the colds and flus. This comes from Ron Perot. He's a PhD out of the New York University Medical Research Department. He did tons of research on the immune system. And then he said, well, let me look at what affects the immune system. And so he said, okay, so let's start out by looking at patients that have cancer. And so he said, okay, when we look at the average immune system, again, those white blood cells can kill a certain number of bacterial cells. So we call that baseline, right? And then what he did was he showed that those that had cancer, they had a 200% less immune response. So in other words, half. So if it could kill 14, it could only kill 7. Does that make sense? So it had a 200% reduced immune response if you had cancer. But then he went on and he checked all kinds of different things, including chiropractic. And this is what he found with chiropractic. People that have been under chiropractic wellness care for at least 5 years were found to have an immune system that was 200% stronger than people who had not had chiropractic care, and 400% stronger than cancer patients. So, cancer patients here, average person here, chiropractic patient here, if you've been under regular chiropractic care. So when I talk about the phases of care, initial intensive care, get you through the symptoms, corrective care, get your spine in the best alignment possible, wellness care, this is why. It's not just about so you can feel good. We love it when you feel good. It's also because you're healthier. Does that make sense? So what do you need to do? Eat well. Dark green leafy vegetables, fruit, beans, nuts, seeds, clean meats. Think well. Prayer, meditation. Journal. Gratitude journal, right? Get out in nature. Avoid TV and avoid those bad friends. Move well. Core strengthening, strength training, and aerobic exercise, right? And whether you run or bike, it doesn't matter. Just get that heart rate up and sweat, right? And then get adjusted, and you will be healthier your whole life, right? I thank you for coming tonight. I hope you learned something, but more importantly, I hope you change something, right? Again, thank you for coming. God bless you. Good night.